Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask Geoff and Lauren. We're here to answer your questions about the double bass. And it's actually night time in Australia where Lauren is, and it's first thing in the morning over here. So, Lauren's going to be in the dark, I'm going to be in the in the light, but we'll try and make it work. And our first question is from Ricardo. So he's been playing bass for about 20 years, electric and upright, and he's got the basics of theory, but he's essentially struggling to sight read, and he'd like to remedy that. So what are your suggestions to approach this? So, and that's Richard actually. So Richard, I think, first of all, if you're learning to sight read, one of the things that I've seen really help people is to understand, to look at rhythm and notation, notes, pitches separately. So really work on your rhythm. And there's lots of kind of apps online where you can tap along with rhythms, practice counting them out and clapping. It's just start with, crotchets and quavers, quarter note and eighth notes. And just really look at all the different divisions, learn to clap on the and of four, learn to clap on, all the different places that you can do, and work on your rhythm that way. And then try and put that together with where the notes are on the instrument. So you need to know your fingerboard to know where the notes are that you're able to play them. And then you need to know what that looks like on the page. And a really good thing to work on is, if you're into jazz bass, practice walking bass lines, because they're generally rhythmically really static. They're generally four quarter notes in a bar, as simple as you're going to get, really, or even two notes in a bar. And just practice. So there you're just focusing not on rhythm but on the notes, and getting your brain thinking about what the C looks like on the stave, how you play that on the double bass. And it's a little bit more fun, than maybe some other things. And then as you move forward, then start adding in more rhythmically diverse music as well. So I think that really helped me. And if you're playing bass guitar, there's a good book as well by Jocelyn Dupre called Simplified Sight Reading for Bass Guitar. And I believe it would work for upright. I don't see why not. It really takes that concept of working on the rhythm separately. And it's a really long established thing. Jazz bass players often use a Louis Belson drum book called something like Sight Reading Studies in 4/4, and I've seen that at music colleges a lot. That's one of the kind of key texts that people use to practice rhythm. But nowadays there are all sorts of apps online for free that you can clap along with the rhythms by pressing your space bar and what have you. And lastly, try to practice looking ahead in the music. Try to not get, just too focused on what you're doing. Try to work, whatever you're doing, on looking ahead to give yourself space. So, Lauren, what about you? I've answered that, in just a particular way, but how would you go about approaching it? Any tips for sight reading, especially for beginners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are two different levels to this question. I think everything you said is absolutely true. I really love all of the suggestions that you gave, especially separating it between the pitches and the rhythm. I think rhythm tends to be everybody's problem area. They learn the notes, and then rhythm is a whole different ball game. So definitely separate that too.
One thing with rhythm as well that's just so important. You're probably getting there, but one of the most common mistakes that I see people make is that they either cut long notes short, or they don't actually leave the time for the rest. So they'll play a long note, and then they'll sort of play the pickup note into the next thing. Really practice recording yourself and filming yourself and listening back, because rhythm is really hard to be subjective about when you're doing it, when you're learning particularly. I find that when I listen back to myself, I get a much clearer picture of rhythm. With pitches, I kind of pretty much know they're either right or wrong, it's the right note or not.
Right.
But with rhythm, it's really hard to evaluate yourself. Sorry, Lauren, for jumping in there.
I think you're right. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And that was something that I wasn't even considering, but that's so true. With rhythm, it's always the long notes and it's always the rest. But when you're auditioning for anything, especially if there's anybody out there that's auditioning for Allstate, honor orchestra, that's what they look for. As soon as you start playing, they start going like this, tapping the rhythm, and they're looking for the notes that you're cutting off or rest you're cutting off. But in terms of learning to read music, I think the two different levels are learning to read music and then also learning to sight read. And I think that they're similar, but they're not exactly the same thing. When you're learning to read music, something I tell my students when they're learning to read a new clef is pick the notes that you know you can recognize. So in tenor clef, everybody hates tenor clef. But in tenor clef, what I did when I was starting to learn to read it was I recognized where the D was on the staff, and that's the top space. And I learned that, and then I could remember what the G looked like, which was the first line on the ledger line above. So you're stacking
the triads. You're looking at the kind of
sort of. I mean, you can't absolutely think about it that way if it helps. But I found a couple notes that I was like, okay, I can remember what those look like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Memorize those, and then kind of put everything together, you know, because that helps. Like if you know where D is and there's a note that's a couple notes above that, and you're like, I'm not sure what that is.
Actually. Or, so if we just take this back, so it's more likely that Richard's going to be learning bass clef for this example. So if he learns that G is in the top space, and then I don't know, you know, he learns that just
use it as a visual. I think for some reason for me, I think because I just am such a visual person, there's certain notes that I look at it and I'm like, for whatever reason, that just looks like what it looks like on the staff. I don't know how else to describe it.
I'm the same, yeah.
If you can find those, then it'll really, really help you both in the moment and just overall learning the clef or whatever it is. But then also in terms of sight reading, I think the thing that helped me both with rhythm and with pitches was learning to recognize patterns. So if you can, I mean, there's only so many patterns that you're going to see in music. And of course there's, you know, thousands. I'm like really underestimating it, but you'll recognize what those patterns are. And for me, the issue was the fingerings, like figuring out what the fingerings were going to be for certain note groupings. But if you can recognize these patterns, you can get through it, and the fingerings aren't going to be an issue. That's what trips a lot of us up.
And this is the same rhythmically, and it's the same in terms of pitch as well, because you'll start to recognize arpeggios, you'll recognize musical patterns, you know, like when you're playing rhythms now, you get to the point where you don't really think about it because you've seen the pattern so much more. And I think the key thing is that when people start out, they're reading note to note to note to note, and rhythmical value to the next one to the next one.
Yeah.
And what we're doing as we get more experience is that we're recognizing groups and patterns and chunking it down, and we'll spot that that's an arpeggio. It's a chromatic run. You know, if you see like how many times you see some kind of big long chromatic run down, and you just look at it really quickly, it's chromatic, and then you're not thinking almost as you're playing it, or I'm not. I'm just playing chromatically down from the top note to the bottom one. You know, you'll start to value, you know, to work that out. And just another quick one for me, Lauren. I don't know if you've got anything else to finish off with, but I was going to say, just to really get a wide variety of music, and, you know, Google Image is your friend, you know, find a load of sheet music online. There's absolutely tons of it. Find music that you enjoy playing that's straightforward and simple, quarter notes and eighth notes at the start. Just keep it simple and work through as much new stuff as you can. And practice sight reading, and then practice, you know, where you'll just be focusing on keeping going, and then maybe work through it slower as well and learn some stuff. Any last thoughts to finish off?
No, I think you covered a lot of it, honestly.
You know, it's been really funny today, Lauren, because it's been getting darker as we've been speaking.
I know.
This is like the haunted episode. We've been, the problem is that we met up earlier, and I've just been on a bit of a mission about something, so I was chatting to Lauren for too long beforehand.
We always chat for like at least 2 hours, and then we start.
Yeah, I know.
But we've never had this time difference before, so.
Yeah, we're going to have to figure this out. But yeah, thanks for sticking with us. Of course, thanks, Richard, for your question. If anyone else wants to join in, maybe point to some books, some, you know, resources that will help him with sight reading, we'd love to hear about that. So share that below, and we'll see you next time.